Hi guys, and welcome to Life of the Tribe in Books. I am Sharon, and just straight up want to apologize for two things. I want to apologize for the sunglasses. I tried to take them off, but just because of the brightness of the sun, I can't. So my eyes are really sensitive to light, so it's just impossible. So I do apologize for the sunglasses. And second, if there's any feedbacky sounding noise or just I'm in my car with the AC on and I cannot turn it off because I would just die of heat and I'll start sweating and it's just not going to be attractive. So I do apologize for if there's any like noise and if there's any vibrations, because I'm resting my phone on my steering wheel because my husband took my tripod up to our church and neither one of us can remember to bring it back home. So I'm using the steering wheel to help support the phone so it's not too shaky. So if it is a little too shaky, I'm sorry. So today I am joining Softbuster Living and some other YouTube channels that I will link down below in a collaboration to share with you summer reading recommendations or suggestions. I know for a lot of people, summer just brings this just kind of atmosphere of just relaxation and just more time to just kind of chill and relax, and so a lot of people really bump up their reading goals in the summer. A lot of people who typically aren't readers read in the summer, and it's just a time, you know, where perhaps you want some lighter reads than what you normally shoot for. So I was thinking about what I could recommend, and it was extremely stressful and difficult because I'm reading a lot of newer books released in like the last 6 months or so. It's kind of like what is filling my TBR stack right now. And so some of those I've read and enjoyed, but I've had to return them to the library because the hold list, the waiting list for them is long, and so I can't keep them, I can't renew them, and so I really didn't want to do a video if I didn't have the book on hand. And then of course there's a lot of books that like I'm like halfway through and I'm not finished, so I can't really recommend those yet. And then there's even a couple of books that I finished, but I'm still processing the book and just trying to figure out, did I like it? Can I recommend it? What in the world happened in that book? So I'm still kind of working through those. So definitely can't recommend those. So I decided what I would do is that I would just look at my personal bookshelves and I would just pull books from my shelves that I would totally be willing to sit down and reread this summer. And when I pulled them down, I found that I had this like mix of adult and children's, and I was like, So I decided I would just do, I would focus on adult books for this video, 5 summer reads for you this summer, and then I will do another one for children's books. I think that's what I'm gonna do. So let's get to the 5 books that I have tossed in my car to share with you today. Some of them I guarantee you a lot of you have read, maybe, and so apologies, but I pulled from my shelves and I pulled books that I legitimately would like open up today and start reading if I had time. So the first one is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. Now I'm not going to assume that everybody's read this book because I just read it for the first time last year. Yeah. Not quite sure how I got through high school and college without reading it, but I didn't. And I didn't watch the Colin Firth movie adaptation of it until about 10 years ago, I think was the first time I watched it. I was just totally Austen illiterate. But I do Wednesdays with Austen with my kids, where every Wednesday we sit down and I read a few chapters from an Austen novel. And so last year we read Pride and Prejudice. And I know a lot of people say that it's their favorite. It's like the one that everybody's read or the movie everybody's seen. But I absolutely loved the book. I did. My concern when we started it was that I would not like it as much as I like the movie, but I actually loved it more. I think I think the relationship between Elizabeth and Darcy is so much better in the book, and I think Darcy's character is as lovely as it is portrayed on screen. I do think that it is so much better in the book, and I just absolutely loved it. So I totally would read this one again this summer, and I just read it last year, and I'm not a rereader. I don't reread a lot of books, but I totally would. This one, unfortunately, I'm reading through Sense and Sensibility with my kids, so I don't want to compete Austen novels like that. So that's my first recommendation. Number 2 is another classic, which is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. And I read this one for the first time, let's see, probably about 7 years ago. Yeah, how did I get through high school and college and not read Jane Eyre? I don't even know. My girls, who are now 19 and 20, I mean, they read Austen and Bronte and Dickens and all that stuff before me. So they are so well read in comparison to me, seriously. But I read Jane Eyre because my daughters read it and they loved it, and I was just like, okay, I'll read it. So good. And I've heard people say that Jane Eyre is a romance novel, and I'm not getting that. This is just an amazing story about Jane Eyre and her life and just her character as a young woman. It is so good. So if you have not read it, it is worth reading this summer. So yeah, so those are my 2 classic recommendations there. And Jane Eyre is kind of lengthy, isn't it? Let me check page count. Oh yeah, it's like almost 500 pages in this copy that I have. But so good. So Pride and Prejudice, Jane Eyre, 2 classic recommendations for this summer. And I am seriously thinking about rereading this because I'm currently in a read-along for A Tree Grows in Brooklyn that I've never read before. And when I was reading the first chapters, and it talks about Francie going to the library and getting recommendations from the librarian and stuff, all I could think was, Francie needs to read this. So I recommend it to Francie. I recommend it to you to read this summer. Okay, up next, I do apologize for moving all around here, but I am in my car trying to manage space here. Okay, so the next 2 books that I have, I think are great companion books. I think they're great to read together, to partner them up. And I think I know there is a term for this type of book where it's written in letters, but I can't remember what the word is off the top of my head. So y'all, I'm shooting this video in a parking lot on the way to my mom's house. That's how my time is right now, so I can't look it up right this second. But I don't even remember where I heard about this book, but I read it a few years ago, several years ago. I don't remember when I read it, but it is now I'm gonna say 84 Charing Cross Road, and I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. I wonder if the British pronounce it differently. I don't know, but this book is so good. Helene, I don't know, there's her name. But it is a book, and it takes place in it's like late 1940s, early 1950s, and she is in America, and she orders books from a used bookstore in England, and it's all done via the postal service, because this is before email and the internet and stuff. And so she writes letters telling the used bookstore the books that she is looking for, and they send them to her, and a relationship is built. And so England, of course, is still dealing with recovering from World War II, and so they're still under having to use rations, and there's still things that they don't have access to and stuff like that. And it's really great because when I first started reading it, I'm like, is this going to be like a love story? But it's not, because the guy who runs the used bookstore is married, and Helene, she actually like sends stuff to his wife and everything. So it's like just like this really lovely friendship that develops between Helene and the bookstore in England. And she's always talking about going over there. And so there's a follow-up book to 84 Charing Cross called The Duchess of Bloomsbury, which is so good too. This is super thin. It is a quick read because it is just written correspondence between Helene and the bookstore. I think his name is Frank, if I remember correctly. And this is actually my daughter's copy. Don't tell her I snatched it off her bookshelf. It's not my copy. It's my daughter's, and I swiped it from her while she was at work. So this is super, super nice. And The Duchess of Bloomsbury, the second one in this, is excellent. And there's actually a third one, I think, called Q's Legacy, which I have not read, but I need to get my hands on. It's not at my library, so I'm going to have to buy it in order to read it. But highly, highly recommend this one. It is so good. Not only is it this like great book relationship between Helene, the bookstore owner, and the people that work there, but it is... What's going on my screen? Okay. But it's also, it just gives you a good glimpse, I'm so sorry, a good glimpse at just post-war in England and how long it took them to recover from that. What is going on with my screen? I don't know. Ooh, child, sunglasses back on. Okay. Now, what I think would be a great companion novel to 84 Charing Cross, because this... myself, because this is nonfiction, because this is true. So yeah, so this is nonfiction. But a great companion to that would be the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society, which is another one that starts with correspondence between a guy who lives on Guernsey Island, and he writes to a lady in England to get more books sent to them on Guernsey, and she ends up, Juliet is her name, and so a relationship is formed there, and she actually goes to Guernsey and meets the Literary Potato Peel Pie Society and meets with them and stuff. It's just a really, so some of this is correspondence, and but not all of it is, but it's post World War II, so I think it goes really well with 84 Charing Cross. There is a movie of this that is really well done, not as it just doesn't quite go into the detail that the book does, of course, but it is very good, the movie is. So definitely recommend reading these two together. I think it would be a super fun summer read, and as I'm sitting here talking about these books, I'm like, man, I really want to reread all of these like right now. I think I might start with 84 Charing Cross. I really love that book. It was so enjoyable. I read it at night when I was pregnant with one of my kids. I can't remember which one. One of them. I read it at night when I was pregnant with them. So really, really, really good. So that is 4. So my 5th summer reading recommendation for you is a book. It came out a couple of years ago. I think it's being made into a movie. I read it several months ago. I recommend it to everybody because I loved it so much. And it is A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Tolls, and it is so good. I loved it so much. And it's about this count. It's when there's a shift in Russia. The terminology just all left my head. I am so sorry. The Bolsheviks, when all that happens and the aristocracy is taken down in Russia, the Count, instead of being killed, he is exiled to a luxury hotel in Moscow, and he is not allowed to leave, and he is given a room up in the old servants' quarters, and that's where he has to stay. And so the story it covers decades of his life spent inside this hotel, and he creates this amazing community and environment inside this hotel, and he forms relationships. And the backdrop of all of that is how history is unfolding in Russia. And at one point, because he is kind of in a bubble in a sense, he is like the luckiest man in Russia, because in this hotel he's like seeing everything play out, but he's like protected in this bubble that they've put him into, seemingly as a punishment. But was it? I don't know. So it's kind of, I know some people have complained that it's slow. I mean, it is a very slow moving book. It is not an action packed adventure story. It is just like this slowly unfolding life of this man and his relationships, and it is just so beautifully written, and it is absolutely lovely, and I just love it. I just loved it. My husband is very, very picky and selective and hard to give books to. He does audiobooks, and there's a lot of stuff that I read that he would have no interest in, but I told him, like, you have got to read this. You've got to get this book on audio and listen to it, and he enjoyed it as well. And I just recommend it. It's so good. So if you haven't read it, grab it from your library, thrift books, wherever you shop for books. So good. A Gentleman in Moscow. So good. So those are my 5 summer reading recommendations for you. Y'all, I am just like, woo! So yeah, and I have a bonus. I almost didn't do it. I was just sitting here thinking as I'm talking, do I want to throw this in here? But I'm going to. I was going to recommend the Lord Peter Wimsey books by Dorothy Sayers. It's murder mystery books. The first one is Whose Body? And I was going to recommend those because I just was going to. But I don't own them, and I didn't have a copy handy. So I didn't decide not to. But I do own The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley. And this is there's several books. I think there's 9. There might be 9 now in this series. And I wasn't really a murder mystery person. I have 2 daughters that love murder mysteries, and so for them, I started reading some Agatha Christie, some Poirot novels, and I really, really like Poirot too. But a friend of mine recommended this book, and so I read it, and I absolutely loved it. The main character is Flavia de Luce, and I think she's 11 or 12 in this book, and so she is just like this chemistry genius, and it's set like in 1950s in this little village in England, and it is just I know some people don't like it. I think people who really don't like it really don't like it, but I love Flavia's character, and I love just the supporting characters in the book. And if you read the first one, I do think you have to read them in order, because there is character development as the series flows, and you kind of see the significance of the relationships. So you do have a murder mystery in each book, and Flavia helps to solve them all. And so it is, but you do see these relationships kind of play out over the books, and it really is, I love it. I think sometimes we read books and we take where we are, and we take how life is now, and we judge the book through that lens. But I think when you read books like this that are set in the 1950s in this little village in England, it's post World War II. This is a family who at one time was this wealthy family, but circumstances have happened, and so even though they once were in high standing, they no longer are financially where they once were, and there's been a great loss of a family member. And so we look at it and we just think, that girl, there's no way. And I think we have to, when we approach a book, we have to look at it through the setting that the book is and through that lens, and not our life and our modern day. And anyway, so those are my recommendations. Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. If you haven't read it, you should. Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I think I definitely need to reread that one this summer. 84 Charing Cross and the Guernsey Literary Potato Peel Pie Society book. 2 must-reads for this summer. If you are a book lover, those are 2 books that if you have not read, you need to, and if you have read them, perhaps you need to reread them this summer. And A Gentleman in Moscow, so good, so good. If it seems like it's starting way too slow, just give it time, because it is so worth it. And then if you just need a good murder mystery while you're sitting by the pool, and you haven't read the Flavia de Luce books, then you definitely want to check out The Sweetness at the Bottom of a Pie. So those are my 5 summer reading recommendations for you. There's going to be a playlist linked down below so that you can see what the other ladies, I have no idea what they're recommending, so it could be just like a wide range of books opening up to you today. And I hope to be back soon with some suggestions for children's books for this summer. And this car is getting hotter and hotter even with the AC running, so I'm gonna just end this, just wrap this up and get on to my mom's house, and I will catch you guys next time. So please down below share what you are reading this summer, because I am always looking to make my TBR stack just a little bit higher. So definitely share what you're reading down below, and if you've read these books, which I'm sure some of you have read some of these books, share your thoughts below, or what you think would be good companion reads to some of the books that I mentioned, because I love reading, buddying up books together. I think that's super fun. So I will catch you guys later, and just make it a great day. Find time to read a book, read a chapter or 2 for yourself, with your kids. Share a book with someone else who may enjoy it, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.